Trenches and excavations are common at many construction sites and are considered one of the most dangerous construction operations. Digging a hole in the ground seems simple, but it is estimated that over 100 deaths per year occur due to cave-ins and other excavation hazards. Digging can be a major cause of concern unless you know proper techniques and the OSHA rules for excavation and trenching. Never dig until you know it is safe. This video will discuss the various aspects of excavation and trenching and will cover the following: OSHA requirements, hazards, working safely in and around excavations and trenches, general requirements, mobile equipment, and the competent person. OSHA Regulation 1926 Subpart P is the relative standard for trenching and excavation work. This OSHA regulation applies to all open excavations made in the Earth's surface and requires workers in trenches and excavations be protected from the hazards that can occur in the operation. Prior to any excavation or trench work, the OSHA requirements should be reviewed and followed. Companies are responsible for knowing and following current federal, state, and local laws, implementing an effective health and safety program, and ensuring all affected employees work safe and follow rules and regulations. By definition, a trench is considered an excavation, but there are differences between the two types of openings. An excavation is any man-made cut, cavity, trench, or depression in an earth surface formed by earth removal. A trench is described as a narrow excavation made below the ground that is deeper than it is wide. Trenches can be up to 15 feet wide. The most feared of all the hazards is the possibility of a cave-in. All excavations are hazardous because they are inherently unstable. Workers can be seriously injured or killed if the sides of a trench collapse. Unsafe trenches are the major factor in many trenching hazards. Trenches don't have to be deep for accidents to occur. Serious injuries are also possible in shallow trenches that are less than 5 feet deep. A cubic yard of dirt can weigh up to 2,700 pounds and is capable of moving at 25 feet per second. A cave-in makes very little noise and gives very little warning prior to the collapse. Some causes of cave-ins include vibrations from equipment or traffic in the area, weight of equipment near the trench edge, weight of excavated material, referred to as spoil, too close to trench edge, poor soil condition, and rain or water which weakens the trench walls. If more than one condition exists, then the risk of collapse increases. Sometimes, excavations are considered to be confined spaces. Asphyxiation due to lack of oxygen in an excavation can occur. Inhalation of toxic fumes released during a dig is also possible. Drowning, electrocution, explosions, and fire are other possible hazards. And finally, when working near the trench, the risk of being hit by a vehicle exists, especially if you are near traffic. Pre-job planning is vital to accident-free trenching. Safety cannot be improvised as work progresses. A key factor to safety includes performing a job site analysis and identifying hazards and possible hazards before work begins. Always take the appropriate measures to eliminate or reduce the risks of hazards. Any employee who is going to work in or near an excavation must be trained. A competent person must be on site at all times to oversee every aspect of excavating and trenching. On work sites, this person is generally the supervisor. A competent person is one who has training in soil analysis and in the use of proper protective systems. The competent person is knowledgeable about trenching and excavation standards, must be able to identify hazards and unsafe conditions, and must have the authority to stop work when unsafe conditions exist. The competent person requires a greater level of training and experience than a normal worker. Any trench or excavation that is 5 feet or more deep requires the use of a protective system. Some contractors require the protective system to be in place in all excavations over 4 feet deep. If excavations are made entirely in stable rock or are less than 5 feet deep, and a competent person has determined that there is no potential for a cave-in, a protective system is not needed. Excavations and trenches deeper than 20 feet or below the base or footing of a foundation or wall require a protective system designed by a registered professional engineer. A protective system is a method of protecting workers from collapses of material that can fall or roll into an excavation or trench, or from the collapse of adjacent structures. Always finish excavation work as quickly as possible. Finally, it is imperative to barricade, protect, or cover an excavation or trench from anyone who may come close when workers are not present. Before digging, the competent person must evaluate the soil conditions. There are 4 types of soil classifications: stable rock, which is the most stable; type A, which is considered very good; type B, which is fair; and type C, which is the least stable and is considered very poor. Soil classification is based on results of at least 1 visual and 1 manual analysis by the competent person. In a visual test, the entire excavation site is observed, including the soil adjacent to the site and the soil being excavated. The evaluator also checks for any signs of vibration. It is common for the competent person to walk the entire site at least twice and observe the areas that will be excavated. A manual analysis consists of physically testing the soil and looking at different consistencies and attributes of the soil. Common tests are a thumb penetration test, which involves pressing the thumb firmly into the soil. The thumb penetration test is the least accurate testing method. A dry strength test, which involves crumbling a sample of soil in your hand. A plasticity or wet thread test is when one attempts to mold a moist sample of soil into a thin thread approximately 1/8 of an inch in diameter by 2 inches in length. And finally, one can use a pocket penetrometer or hand-operated shear vane to determine the unconfined compression strength of soils. Select and construct the appropriate protective systems in accordance with OSHA standards. The system used is based on soil classification. Protective systems include sloping, benching, and support systems including shoring and shielding. Sloping an excavation is when sides of an excavation are inclined away from the excavation so as to prevent cave-ins. The soil condition and the angle of repose determines the degree of slope required. Benching is a means of excavating the sides of an excavation to form one or a series of horizontal levels or steps, usually with vertical or near vertical surfaces between levels. If soil conditions warrant, and the trench is more than 4 feet deep, a support system structure of underpinning, bracing, or shoring, which provides support to an adjacent structure, underground installation, or the sides of an excavation must be used. 2 types of support systems are commonly used. Shoring, which is the process of placing metal or wood panels inside a trench, against the soil walls, and securing them in place with bars and vices. Proper shoring prevents cave-ins. The second system is the use of shields. The shield system is a structure that is able to withstand the forces imposed on it by a cave-in. Shields used in trenches are usually referred to as trench boxes or trench shields. Prior to digging, it is imperative that all underground utilities, such as gas, electric, phone, cable, water lines, etc., are located and marked. By calling the nationwide one-call number 811, various utility companies will send out representatives to locate the various utilities lines. While the excavation is open, any underground utility lines must be protected, supported, or removed as necessary. All necessary precautions must be taken to prevent damaging underground utilities. If an underground utility is damaged, notify the utility operator immediately. If the damage results in the release of hazardous gases or liquids, both the utility operator and appropriate emergency response officials should be notified immediately. Call 911 if appropriate. Before starting to dig, plan and implement traffic control as necessary to protect workers and the excavation. Although it is not common, the exposure to harmful contaminants can cause problems for workers inside and around trenches. Workers must be protected from exposure to harmful levels of atmospheric contaminants, oxygen deficiency, hazardous fumes, and toxic gases. Ensure adequate ventilation in the trench or use proper respiratory protection if needed. Always have on hand emergency rescue equipment when a hazardous atmosphere exists or can reasonably be expected to exist. This equipment includes breathing apparatus, safety harness and line, or a basket stretcher. Trenches deeper than 4 feet must have a means of entry and exit. This is usually provided for by a ladder. Ladders should extend 3 feet above the top of the excavation and be located within 25 feet of workers. Structural ramps that are used solely for access or egress from excavations must be designed by a competent person. Use ramps made from the earth as a means of egress only if a worker can walk on them in an upright position. If water accumulation is present or possible, use pumps or drainage system. Never enter a trench that has water accumulated in it. Daily inspection is required by the competent person. This inspection should occur at the beginning of each shift, following any rainstorm, and after any change of condition that could compromise the trench. For example, the movement of any equipment along the edge of an excavation. Place spoil from the trench far enough away as not to cause a hazard. The weight of the spoil has been known to cause cave-ins. A competent person should direct the spoil's placement. The placement should be at least 2 feet away from the trench. If the worksite does not permit a 2-foot setback, then the spoils should temporarily be removed from the area. Use a retaining device, such as a trench box, which extends above the top of the trench to prevent spoils and equipment from falling back into the trench. Falling loads can also be a hazard for workers. Workers should never work or stand under loads that are being handled by lifting or digging equipment. Workers must stand away from a vehicle being loaded to avoid being struck by falling materials or spillage. All workers on an excavation site must wear hard hats. Safety glasses and steel-toed work shoes are also recommended. While loading with equipment such as backhoes or dump trucks, an operator may remain in the cab as long as the equipment is properly equipped with a cab shield or adequate canopy. Mobile equipment should have a warning device, such as a backup alarm. Steps should also be taken to protect equipment from falling into excavations by installing barricades and using stop logs. The use of hand or mechanical signals only works when everyone on the site is familiar with the signals and knows what they mean. Crossing a trench on its surface should be discouraged. If trenches must be crossed, appropriate walkways or bridges with guardrails must be provided. In the event of an accident, follow all safety procedures. Alert the competent person, appropriate emergency response personnel, necessary utility companies, and others according to your company policy. Never attempt to rescue a fellow worker during a cave-in. A second cave-in is very likely. Leave all rescues to trained rescue personnel. This video has discussed many aspects of trenching and excavating. Remember to follow all safety rules. If a situation seems unsafe, alert the competent person and stop work until it is safe to continue. Never take shortcuts or try to skip necessary safety procedures. Finish excavation work as quickly as possible in a safe manner. Remember, you are the one working in the trench or excavation. It is your life that may be at risk.